Greetings, cozy knights. Lower your swords and rest by the fire. Tonight, we journey through the hidden heartbreak buried inside Skyrim's most quietly devastating characters. The ones you may have passed a dozen times without ever knowing what you were really looking at. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're listening from tonight, and subscribe if this helps you sleep. The river still waits. There is a man who lives on the eastern bank of the Ivarstead River, just downstream from the village itself, where the water runs shallow and cold and the reeds grow tall enough to hide the gaps between worlds. His name is Nafi. You will find him the first time you cross into Ivarstead, heading toward High Hrothgar, because the road carries you right past the ruin of what used to be his home. A collapsed, half-rotted shell of a building that barely deserves the word structure anymore. Its walls open to the weather, its floor half sunken into the mud. And standing in or around that ruin, day after day, is a thin, underdressed man with bare feet, even in winter. He walks in slow circles. He talks to himself. He calls out a name that nobody answers. On the surface, Nafi reads as background detail. Skyrim is full of beggars and eccentrics, and most players give him the few coins he asks for, note the strange sad expression on his face, and continue up the mountain without a second thought. He seems like flavor, like set dressing for a town that is itself already tinged with melancholy. Ivarstead being the kind of place where the wind never seems to fully stop, and the residents speak with the particular flatness of a people who have long since accepted that things will not improve. There are farms nearby, there is a mill, there is the ancient bridge leading toward the 7,000 steps, but none of it has the warmth of a thriving place. The people here have learned to endure rather than to expect. Nafi fits into that atmosphere so naturally that it is easy to file him away as part of the scenery and move on. But if you stay, if you talk to him more than once, if you ask him the right things, if you exhaust his dialogue options instead of skimming the first one, he will tell you about his sister. Her name was Rhaeda. She lived with him, or nearby, and she used to bring him food and check on him when the cold got bad, when the ruins grew too drafty and the mud crept too close to where he slept. He speaks about her in the present tense, which is the first thing that should give you pause. He says she's been gone for a while. He says she must be out gathering ingredients, because she did that sometimes. She was an herbalist of sorts, or at least someone who found purpose and pleasure in knowing what grew along the riverbanks and what could be done with it. He says she would head out along the river and not come back for a day or two, that this was nothing unusual, that she was like that. She liked to take her time. He says she will be back soon. He is certain of this. He holds that certainty the way a man holds a torch in a dark cave. Not because he is confident the flame will last, but because to let it go is to be alone in absolute darkness. The people of Ivarstead, when you ask them, are less gentle about it. They say Rhaeda has been missing for a year, not a few days, not a difficult week, a year. They say they doubt she is coming back. Some of them say this with the practiced directness of Nords who see no utility in softening what is true. And some say it with a kind of tired sadness for Nafi specifically, a sadness they have been carrying long enough that it has lost its sharp edges and become simply part of the texture of living in this town. There is a quest associated with him, one of those quiet, optional things that most players never activate because there is no dramatic hook and no obvious reward on the front end. Klimek, one of the locals who makes the climb to High Hrothgar regularly with supplies for the Greybeards, will tell you that Nafi has been deteriorating, that he barely eats, that his grip on what is real has been loosening steadily for months, that the man everyone already considered fragile is now something more brittle still. If you take that thread and pull it, the quest sends you not into a dungeon or a marked camp, but along the river itself, into the specific places Rhaida would have walked on a day when she went out to gather and did not come back. The clues are environmental, found at the water's edge, in the reeds, in the places where the river narrows and the footing grows uncertain. This is worth slowing down to appreciate, because it is unusual. Most of Skyrim's tragedy is delivered through dungeons and confrontations and clearly marked locations on the map. Rhaida's story is delivered by a riverbank in a small valley, at the foot of the throat of the world, in the kind of unassuming natural space that the game usually treats as transition terrain between important places. You are not in an important place. You are in the ordinary geography of someone's ordinary life, looking for evidence that the ordinary ended here. The Ivar River runs cold and fast in the sections where the mountains press close, and shallower and more still in the flatter stretches near town. The reeds grow where the water slows. The plants Rhaida would have been gathering. The kinds of herbs that grow in wet ground, at the margins between water and land, in the places where you have to lean out a little to reach them, grow in exactly those marginal places where the footing is least certain and the bank gives way without announcing it. The game does not mark the exact spot where she fell with any particular distinction. The river looks like the river. The reeds look like reeds. You are simply walking the edge of a body of water that took someone and kept them. And the only way to know you are in the right place is to wade in and look at what the current has kept. And when you find her, the answer is quiet, in the way that the worst answers often are. She did not die dramatically. She drowned. Her skeletal remains are lying on the riverbed, just southeast of Ivarstead, near the bridge, in water that is cold enough and murky enough and unremarkable enough that a body could lie there for a year before anyone who was not specifically looking would find it. Beside her remains is a satchel containing alchemical ingredients, the gathering she was doing when she died, and her necklace. That necklace is what you bring back to Nafi. It is what the quest, called The Straw That Broke, revolves around. Not a weapon, not a piece of armor, not anything that signals heroism. A necklace, the last physical trace of someone's sister retrieved from a riverbed, carried back to a man standing in a ruin. The specific circumstances of how she ended up in the water are left open, the way rivers leave most of their worst secrets open. Whether she slipped on a wet stone, whether the current was running high that day, whether she stepped somewhere she did not expect to step and the cold water did the rest. The game does not say. It does not need to say. The absence of explanation is its own form of cruelty, because it means Nafi will never have a clean story to tell himself. No monster, no villain, no reason that would make the shape of his loss comprehensible. Just a river, and a woman who went into it and did not come out. When you bring the news back to him, you have a choice about how to frame it. And here is what matters, the part that most players overlook entirely. Nafi does not collapse or weep dramatically. He does not react the way a revelation scene in a better lit game might prepare you to expect. He thanks you with a kind of hollow gratitude, the gratitude of someone who has received confirmation of the thing they were most afraid of, the thing they have been half knowing for months but could not afford to fully know. The quest resolves, the marker disappears, you walk away, and if you come back to Ivarstead afterward, Nafi is still there, does not pack up and leave. He does not move into a building or start taking better care of himself or find the closure that dramatic grief is supposed to deliver. He is still standing near the ruin, still underdressed, still calling out into a middle distance that has nothing to offer him. What you may not know, what the Dark Brotherhood questline reveals separately, in a completely different thread that requires you to be enrolled in that questline at all, is that Nafi has a contract on his life. Someone has paid for his death. The mechanics of the Brotherhood mean that at some point you receive his name as a target. He's classified as an optional kill, a bonus assassination that adds extra gold to the payout, presented within that questline without context or explanation. Just a name and a location and a sum of money. There is no explanation given within the Brotherhood framework for why anyone would want a harmless, grief-broken man by a river dead. But the pieces are there, if you look at them together. Wilhelm, the innkeeper in Ivarstead, the man who is kind to travelers, helpful and convivial and eager to see you safely on your way up the mountain, has always been the most likely candidate for what really happened. And this is the reading many players have arrived at after sitting with the evidence. If Rhaida was gathering along the river and stumbled onto something she was not supposed to see, some kind of operation running through the mountain passes, commerce that moves better at night and without witnesses, then her death may not have been purely a matter of wet stones and bad luck. And if Nafi, in his deteriorating mental state, begins to surface fragments of half-recalled things, a detail Rhaida mentioned in passing on a night no one else was present to hear, then Nafi becomes a loose thread. A man capable of arranging one death is capable of arranging another, especially when the second target is a confused, homeless man the village already thinks of as unfortunate rather than credible. The game never confirms this reading. There is no confession, no journal entry where Wilhelm writes down what he did. What exists is the shape the available facts make when you hold them all together. The drowning, the Brotherhood contract, the helpful innkeeper, the year of silence. When the Dark Brotherhood sends you to Nafi's door, you are not simply an assassin completing a routine entry on a ledger. You are, in the most unwelcome possible reading, the final instrument of someone's cleanup, sent to erase the last living memory of a woman who saw something she should not have seen. His death does not bring justice. It brings silence. What makes this particularly worth sitting with is the position the game places you in. In the Find Rhaida quest, you are the one who tells Nafi the truth. You are the one who gives him the only honest accounting he will ever receive of what happened to his sister. And then, in a completely separate quest line, you are potentially the one who kills him, not knowing, or knowing and not stopping, that you are completing the work of whoever arranged Rhaida's death. You are the person who gave him closure and the person who ended him. In the darkest reading, you are the last act of a crime that started at the river's edge, arriving after the fact, sent by someone who understood that grief-broken men eventually remember inconvenient things. The river keeps moving. The reeds grow tall. The ruins stay where they are, open to the sky. There will be a space where a man used to stand and wait. Eventually, the snow will cover that too. What the fire remembers. The first thing you hear when you arrive in Mortal is that the town has been shaken by tragedy. The Jarl Steward will mention it if you ask what is happening locally, or a guard will, or you might simply find your way to the burned ruin on the edge of the settlement. A house reduced to charred beams and collapsed walls, still smelling faintly of ash, even weeks after the fire. It is not a subtle scene. The destruction is total and unambiguous. Whatever was inside that house did not survive. Morthal is already a heavy-feeling place before you learn any of this. It sits in the marsh of the Jalmacher, surrounded by a permanent low fog, a small cluster of buildings held together by the particular tenacity of people who have chosen to stay somewhere difficult and have organized their identity around having done so. The residents speak about their home with a wary affection. The Jarl, Idgrod Ravencrone, trades in visions and prophecies and makes her guards quietly uncomfortable. And now there has been a fire, and Hrogar's wife and his daughter, Helgi, are dead, and the heir in Morthal has acquired an additional quality of wrongness that nobody can fully name. What you are told, fairly quickly, is that Hrogar's wife and his young daughter Helgi died in the blaze. What you are also told, with the careful tone that people use when they suspect something but cannot prove it, is that the man who lived there with them, a local named Hrogar, walked out of the fire without a scratch, and that within days of the fire, he moved in with a woman named Alva, not with relatives, not to the inn to grieve in temporary accommodation. He walked directly from the ashes of his family into another woman's house, into what appeared to observers to be a willing and even eager transition, and the town has not recovered from the confusion of watching it. Small towns observe their members with the thorough, involuntary attention of communities that share limited space, and few enough people that everyone's business eventually becomes communal property. Morthal is small enough that the transition from grieving husband to Alva's housemate was witnessed in its entirety. The days immediately following the fire, the absence of visible mourning, the way he moved through the settlement without the particular heaviness that grief is supposed to produce. People noticed. They noticed, and they talked, quietly, in the specific way that small communities talk about things they have not yet decided what to do with. Some thought he had set the fire himself. Some thought grief made people strange, and that there was no accounting for how someone behaved in shock. A few thought Alva had something to do with it, but could not say exactly what or why, beyond a vague unease about a woman who had always lived slightly outside the town's social gravity without any clear explanation for why. Hrogar is not hard to find. He spends his days in town performing the basic functions of someone who is present without being there. He moves materials. He maintains things. He is functional in the most minimal possible sense. There is something wrong with his eyes when you speak to him. A flatness, a vacancy, a quality of someone receiving your words from a great distance and generating responses out of reflex rather than genuine engagement. He does not perform guilt. He does not perform grief. He performs nothing. And the nothing is somehow more unsettling than either of those things would be. The quest laid to rest begins not with Hrogar but with the girl, Helgi, because Helgi did not entirely leave when the house burned. Her ghost lingers near the ruins in the evenings, barely visible, flickering in the way the game's ghosts flicker. Present enough to see if you are looking, easy to miss if you are not. She asks you to find her before the other one does. She says it with the cadence of a child proposing a game of hide and seek, but there is an urgency beneath the play that does not belong to games. She knows she is dead in some fashion. She simply has not yet fully processed what that means. The way children absorb enormous facts from the edges inward, because their minds are not yet built to take the full weight at once. She leads you, eventually, to where her body is buried, not inside the ruins, outside in the cold ground, in a spot you would not find without her direction. Someone buried her separately, intentionally placed her away from the wreckage, in earth rather than ash. The question of why she is out there, who moved her, when, and with what intention, is the thread the quest asks you to follow, and following it leads you through the marsh and into what Morthal has been living next to without knowing it. What the investigation surfaces is this. Alva is a vampire. She has been in Morthal long enough to seem ordinary, long enough to have a house, a routine, a social position that nobody questioned. Vampires in the Elder Scrolls tradition operate partly through a mechanism of mental domination that works through proximity and repetition, and a gradual replacement of the subject's own will with the vampire's preferences. Hrogar did not choose Alva over his family. He was occupied. The man who moved in with her days after the fire was not Hrogar making a decision. It was a man whose decision-making had been replaced with instructions. Alva's journal, which you find in her house, is not subtle. She writes about Hrogar with clinical satisfaction. He is useful as protection while she sleeps through the daylight hours. She writes about Leolette too, but the journal reveals a larger purpose behind all of it. Alva was sent to Morthal by a master vampire named Movarth, with a specific mission to infiltrate the town, seduce its guards one by one, and eventually turn Morthal into a blood farm, a steady supply of living thralls for the Coven. Hrogar was the first step. Getting access to him meant removing his family. Leolette, who had already been turned into a vampire by Alva, was given that task. The fire was not an accident, and it was not a crime of passion. It was a calculated removal. Leolette was an instrument. She did what she was ordered to do. She herself did not survive the aftermath of doing it. There is a layer beneath this that the journal only gestures at. Leolette had her own life before Alva found her. She was a resident of Morthal herself, Thonir's wife. Morthal has a citizen named Thonir, who, when you encounter him at Helgi's grave, after killing Leolette, is hysterical at what he sees. He thought his wife had left him to join the Stormcloak rebellion. He had been living in Morthal carrying the ordinary grief of abandonment, while the real story was that she had been turned and weaponized and sent to burn a family's house down. He is one of several people in Morthal whose understanding of events is a polished full surface, covering something far worse. And the polishing was done by whoever wanted the truth to stay buried. The tragedy of Leolette is almost entirely off-screen, glimpsed in the corner of a story that is officially about someone else, present in the negative space around the main facts. She was used and discarded, and the only evidence of her subjectivity is in what the journal implies she felt about what she was asked to do to the child. The game does not say what she felt. It shows you what she did and trusts you to imagine the rest. And the thing you are left imagining is a woman who was not evil but was controlled, who retained enough of herself to feel the weight of what she was doing, who perhaps found the child's face as unbearable as you do, and who did it anyway, because the thing that controls you does not stop when you feel something about what it is asking. Leolette is in some sense the story's third victim, buried under the more visible losses of the wife and daughter, her own grief and loss and horror invisible because she is classified as an instrument rather than a person. The game does not ask you to feel for her. It simply leaves the information there for the player who stops to look at it. Helgi's burial outside the house is the detail that stays longest. Think about the sequence. The fire burns, the bodies are in the wreckage, and then, at some point, someone went to that wreckage and took the child and put her in the ground with something approaching care. A marked spot, separate from the destruction, placed intentionally. Whether that was Hrogar's hands following an instruction, or whether it was some fragment of Hrogar himself briefly surfacing through the enthrallment, that stubborn human insistence that a child should not be left in ash, the game does not say. But the burial is physically there. She is in the earth, and someone put her there deliberately. That detail matters more than almost anything else in the quest, because it means that somewhere, in whatever was happening, there was one moment of something that was not entirely monstrous. One small act of dignity in the middle of everything else. When you kill Alva and break the enthrallment, Hrogar comes back to himself. This is not a triumphant rescue. He returns to consciousness the way someone returns to a room after a disaster. The furniture is where it was, but something has burned. He knows what happened. He knows what was done through his hands. He knows his daughter called for him and he did not respond, because the part of him that would have responded had been removed. He was present in the room of his own horror with no access to his ability to stop it. Morthal does not fully forgive him even after the explanation comes out. They cannot perform a retroactive recalibration of months of watching him move through town without visible grief, while his family's ash was still settling. They understand what happened. Understanding and feeling are different organs, and the feeling, weeks of accumulated suspicion, the low, steady shock of watching what looked like indifference, does not dissolve because the mechanism has been explained. The quest ends. The Jarl thanks you. The marsh keeps fogging and the skeletal trees keep standing with their particular patience. And the ruins of the house stay at the edge of Morthal because nobody tears them down and nobody rebuilds. Morthal is not the kind of town that has spare resources for demolition of things that are not actively threatening it, and the ruin is not actively threatening it. It is simply there, at the edge of the settlement, slowly being absorbed back into the marsh that surrounds everything in this part of the hold. By the time the moss grows over the remaining beams and the ground soft and wet enough swallows the foundation stones, nobody who passes it will know what stood here. That is the specific kind of ending that Morthal offers. Not dramatic, not marked, just gradual disappearance into the landscape that was always waiting to reclaim it. Hrogar stays in Morthal. This is what the game shows you if you look for him after the resolution. He is still there, still moving through the town, still performing the functional motions of someone present. He is not broken in any visible way. He does not sit and stare into distance or refuse to speak. He works. The work is what he has. But there is a quality to his presence in the town that is different from the mechanical vacancy of the enthralled version. This is a man who knows exactly what he is doing and what it costs and why he is doing it anyway, which is a more complicated kind of burden than not knowing at all. He's paying for something by staying here, in this town, near the ruins of what he was. Whether that payment is guilt or penance, or simply the absence of anywhere better to go, the game does not say. He is there. The town goes around him. The marsh goes around the town. The fog comes in off the water in the mornings and sits until midday, and then the pale sun of the Hjalmarsha burns it off, and then the evening brings it back, and Hrogar is still there in whatever light the day provides. Helgi's ghost does not reappear after the resolution. The small grave outside is still there. No inscription, no name carved into anything. Just the cairn and the cold air above it, and a child who asked you to find her before the other one did. the last name left. Windhelm carries its tragedies the way old stone carries weather, deeply, structurally, in ways that are not always visible from the outside, but that have shaped everything beneath the surface over generations. The Shattershield house sits on a quieter street within the city walls, and the tragedy inside it is still in the process of happening when you arrive. Not past tense, not resolved, not even fully acknowledged by the people within it, because to acknowledge the full shape of it would be to admit that there is very little left to hold. You encounter the Shattershield family in pieces, a name mentioned by a guard. A house you can enter because the families of murder victims are never quite private anymore. And behind a desk in what was once an active office, a man named Torbjorn, who looks at you with the particular exhaustion of someone who has been holding something enormous for a very long time, and whose arms have not given out only through habit. Torbjorn Shattershield is a patriarch in name and in posture, and almost nothing else by the time you meet him. He runs the Shattershield shipping company from an office that has the feel of a room where work used to happen. Papers present, desk in place. The trappings of professional purpose arranged around him like stage scenery around an actor who has forgotten their lines. But Torbjorn himself performs occupation rather than inhabiting it. He responds to you when you speak. He tells you, if you ask, that his daughter Frigga was murdered by the Windhelm killer the guards have been calling the Butcher, a serial killer whose victims are young women, whose methods have a ritualistic quality, whose identity has eluded investigation through weeks of quiet horror. His voice, when he says these things, is level, in the way that voices become level when the person speaking has rehearsed the sentences enough times that the emotional charge has worn smooth from use. The letters and notes scattered through the house, readable if you open the drawers, if you take the time, reveal a private mind far less composed than the public face. There are letters abandoned mid-sentence, stopped at the point where the thought became too large to finish. Notes that read like a man trying to establish, through repetition, that he has specific reasons to keep going through the specific activities that constitute a day. The shipping company is failing, not because the business is structurally unsound, but because the person responsible for it cannot sustain the concentration that commerce requires. His partners have begun working around him, the way households quietly adjust to an incapacitated member without ever formally naming the incapacitation. His wife Tova moves through the rooms with the mechanical persistence of someone still operating on the momentum of a former self, the self that existed before Frigga was taken. She will speak if you engage her, but the quality of her engagement is thin. She loved Frigga in a way that exceeds what most people mean when they use the word. Frigga was not just her child. She was a specific future that Tova had been imagining in detail for years, who Frigga would become, what her life would hold, what her face would look like at 30 and at 50. The Butcher did not merely kill a girl. He cancelled an entire imagined future, and Tova lives in the collapsed space where that future was. And then there is Nilsine, the surviving daughter, Frigga's twin. Nilsine carries what might be the most structurally complex grief in the household, though it is the least visible, not just the loss of her sister, but the particular weight of being the one who was not taken. They were twins. They grew up in the same house, separated by a wall, knowing each other with the specific fluency of siblings who have shared everything. And then, on a night that began like other nights, one of them did not come home. Nilsine has to live with the version of events where she survived, which means she also has to live with every variation of the question that implies a question without an answer that does not stop being asked. She functions. She moves through Windhelm. She speaks about Frigga when prompted with a directness that is more troubling than obvious distress, because it suggests she has narrated the loss enough times that the delivery has become smooth, which is not the same as healed. She is cauterized rather than closed. The blood on the Ice quest line exists partly to deliver justice to families the Butcher has torn through. The investigation is methodical, and if you follow it carefully, you arrive at Calixto Corium. The museum curator, the friendly scholarly man who sells you curiosities out of a building he presents as a repository of historical interest. The museum is worth visiting before you know what Calixto is, and then worth visiting again after, because the two experiences are completely different. Before, a slightly odd collection of artifacts, some genuine, some invented, arranged with the particular obsessive care of someone who takes presentation seriously and whose relationship with the past has an intensity that reads as enthusiastic rather than alarming. After, every exhibit is part of a portrait. The objects he has gathered and displayed are not random. They cluster around themes of preservation, of death defied, of bodies maintained beyond their natural span. The necromancer's amulet he shows you, wheelstone he calls it, dismissing it as junk, is the centerpiece of the ritual he is performing. He is showing it to you. He is walking you through his workspace and pointing at the tools and narrating their false histories. And nothing in his manner suggests he understands this as confessional. He has been killing women in acts he has convinced himself serve a sacred purpose, rebuilding what he lost, in the way that a mind shattered by grief reassembles its logic around the fracture point, rather than repairing it. His sister Lucilla is the fracture point. She was murdered, and he witnessed it, and his mind reorganized around that witnessing in a way that eventually made murder seem like the only available response. Not murder as revenge, but murder as restoration, murder as medicine. Each kill a component in a procedure he has spent years designing. The horror of it is not the violence but the sincerity. He genuinely believes he is doing something necessary. He genuinely believes the women he kills are giving something to a purpose, greater than their individual lives. His grief is real. The love that drives him is real. What happened to that love in the years after his sister died is the story of what grief does when it isn't processed, but instead followed to its conclusions without any of the interruptions that normally save people from their worst ideas. You stop him. That is what the questline is for, and it does its job. But the game is careful, quiet, deliberate about showing you that justice and restoration are not the same word. You bring down Calixto. You do not return what he took. Tova does not recover when you tell her. Torbjorn does not stand straighter behind his desk. The mechanism of grief does not reverse when its cause is addressed, because grief is not a reaction to a wound that heals when the wound is treated. Here is where the story divides into its most devastating possibility, and this is the part that requires you to be running the Dark Brotherhood questline simultaneously, which most players are doing without thinking about the intersection. At a certain point in that questline, you receive the name Nilsine Shattershield as a bonus assassination target. The contract originates with Muri, an alchemist in Markarth, who has a real grievance against a man who used and betrayed her. That grievance is legitimate, but alongside the contract on that man, Muri has also requested Nilsine's death. Nilsine's crime was withdrawing from their friendship after the scandal. A social cooling, a friendship that diminished under pressure and did not warm back up. Muri has elevated this in the private courthouse of her own psyche to something that merits a death sentence. The Brotherhood does not evaluate the merit of contracts. It accepted. The kill is optional. The bonus gold is substantial. Many players take it without pausing to trace the Shatter Shield name back to the house on the quieter street, back to the desk with the unfinished letters, back to Torbjorn sitting in the room that used to be an office. If you return to Windhelm after Nilsine is dead, Torbjorn Shattershield is also dead, not killed by enemies, not caught in the Civil War's violence. He simply ended, in the private and undramatic way that private decisions end things, unable to continue with what remained after the second daughter was gone. The house is quiet. The papers are still on the desk. The half-written letters are still where he left them. Tova remains in the technical sense, still moving through the rooms, but she is now a woman who has lost one daughter to a murderer, another to an assassin, and her husband to the accumulated impossibility of continuing, all in a house that is simply a location where people used to live. The house itself, if you visit it after this, has a quality that houses acquire when they outlive the number of people they were built for. It is too large for one person, not in the architectural sense, but in the atmospheric one. There are rooms where someone used to be, chairs where someone used to sit, corners that still hold the particular resonance of absent habit. The shipping company paperwork is still there because no one has cleared it. The desk is still occupied by the evidence of a business no one is running. Tova moves through all of this with the mechanical persistence of someone for whom stopping would mean confronting the full scale of what she is standing in, and that confrontation may simply be beyond what she can do. She is still there when you visit. She will speak. The quality of her speech is thin, in a way that has progressed past grief into something more fundamental. The specific thinness of someone who has been waiting, without quite knowing what for, in the only place they have left. The Shattershield name dies. That is the specific thing the game acknowledges. A family line, a name that carried weight in Windhelm's commerce, a history of people who worked and loved and built something. Ending here, in this house, because of intersecting threads that the game trusts you to connect without making the connection explicit. Most players never connect them. They complete the bonus contract in one quest line and never return to the street in Windhelm where the consequences landed. The game does not announce what happened. It simply shows you an empty chair behind a desk full of letters a man never finished, and waits for you to understand what you are looking at. There is a particular cruelty in the timing of it relative to Windhelm's larger story. The civil war rages through the city and the province. Ulfric holds court. The Stormcloak cause is argued and contested, and people die for it daily. And in the middle of all that political noise, on a quieter street inside the city walls, a family ends. Not because of the war, not because of ideology, but because a murderer with a ritual obsession killed a young woman. And because a grieving alchemist in a distant city decided that a social slight was worth a death, and because an assassin's questline offered bonus gold. The Shattershields are not a casualty of Skyrim's great conflicts. They are a casualty of the small ones, the personal ones, the ones that do not get written into any history. The Civil War will be resolved eventually, one way or another. The Shattershield house will simply remain quiet, the desk undisturbed, the letters unfinished, as evidence of the kind of loss that does not make it into anyone's account of what the war years were like. The Keeper's Unraveling. You will hear Cicero before you see him. The sound travels ahead of him on the road south of Whiterun. A singing voice, slightly too bright for the weather, carrying a tune with the desperate cheerfulness of someone who has decided that cheerfulness is non-negotiable, regardless of circumstance or evidence. He is dressed in motley, the costume of a jester, bright red and yellow, bells on his hat, face paint. He is pushing a cart with a broken wheel, and he is singing at it, possibly to it. And when he sees you, he waves with genuine delight and the bells jingle, and he is absolutely thrilled that you exist. He needs help with his wheel. His cargo, he explains, with elaborate and slightly unhinged courtesy, is a coffin. He is transporting a body. He needs to reach the next town, where a carpenter can do the repair, and he would be so grateful, terribly grateful, if you might be willing to assist. He mentions the coffin's occupant with the tender protectiveness of someone describing a sleeping family member, making sure she is not jostled, making sure she is comfortable, making sure the journey is as dignified as a broken wheel on a muddy road allows. Most players find Cicero immediately entertaining, a burst of chaotic warmth in a world that takes itself seriously, a jester loose in a landscape of grim warriors and tired innkeepers. They help him and move on without thinking much about what they are actually looking at. A man in a jester's costume, alone in the wilderness, in an advanced state of something that reads as either madness or performance or some synthesis of both, transporting a coffin as though it contains someone he loves. Because it does. He is the keeper. The coffin holds the Night Mother, the physical remains of the Dark Brotherhood's patron, the woman through whom the organization's divine communications travel, the sacred center of a religion built around the rites of professional killing. In function, Cicero is a holy man. His role was given to him by the Brotherhood in Cyrodiil, back when there was a Brotherhood in Cyrodiil, back when the title came with a congregation. There was not, by the time you meet him on that road, a Brotherhood in Cyrodiil. Not in any meaningful sense. What had once been a significant criminal religious organization with deep roots and multiple sanctuaries had collapsed over the preceding years. Not in a single catastrophic event, but in the slow, demoralizing way that institutions collapse when the things holding them together come apart one by one. Members died or were killed. Others drifted away when contracts became scarce. The sanctuaries emptied by attrition. The rituals fell out of practice because there was no one left to practice them. And Cicero stayed. The journals in the Falkreath Sanctuary, kept over years, accessible from Cicero's room there once you have access to it, are the document of what staying cost him. You can read them in sequence, and they are one of the most complete portraits of slow psychological collapse anywhere in Skyrim's written materials. Cicero's room in the Falkreath Sanctuary sets the stage for this reading in a way that matters. It is a place that has been lived in by one person, and the traces of that person are still present in the specific way that long-occupied spaces accumulate the texture of their inhabitants. The room is not disordered. He is not a man who stopped caring about his environment. The care is visible, almost meticulous. The journals themselves are stacked with the precision of someone who understands that they are a record, that they have an order, that the order matters. Being in that room and reading those journals in sequence is one of the more quietly disorienting experiences Skyrim offers, because you are watching someone's mind change in real time, entry by entry, and the person writing does not know you are reading. The early entries are almost bureaucratic. He writes about his duties with professional precision, logging the state of the night mother's coffin, noting the ritual schedule, reporting on other members with the restrained formality of someone trained in composure. He documents deaths and departures with controlled grief. He is disciplined. He is careful. He writes clearly. Reading these earliest entries, you can see who he was before. A capable man with a specific professional identity, writing with the confidence of someone who believes the institution he serves is permanent and that his role in it is meaningful, and that there are people who will read these records after him. Then a contract comes in, a jester, a man who makes his living entertaining, wearing motley, performing for audiences who want laughter. Cicero kills him as assigned, cleanly, without complications. The record suggests a professional job by professional standards. But the entries after that contract have a different quality. He begins writing about the costume, about the specific way the fabric moved in the kill location's lamplight, about the colors, the bells, the particular quality of the face paint. He returns to it in the next entry, and the next, with an increasing frequency that he himself notices in the writing. Observing his own fixation with the detached curiosity of a scientist noting an anomaly, without being able to stop producing the anomaly. Then he begins wearing the costume. He is the last member present. There is no one to tell him it is strange. There is no one to tell him anything. By the middle period of the journals, the entries have changed register entirely. He is holding conversations with the night mother's coffin, not prayers in the formal devotional sense. Conversations. He reports to her about his day, about what he ate and whether he thought it adequate, about the state of the sanctuary's roof, which is developing a concerning crack, about minor decisions he needs to make and would like another perspective on. He tells her when he misses the others. He tells her when the silence gets to a particular quality that he describes as the wrong kind of quiet, as distinct from the right kind, though he does not explain the difference because he is writing for an audience that already understands it. He has transferred the entire architecture of his social existence, the need to be heard, to be responded to exist within a relationship with another consciousness, onto a container holding human remains, because the container is there and constant when everything else has left or died, maintaining the fiction that she is listening, that she hears him, that she is company, is the thing standing between him and a void, whose shape he can feel in the entries where the handwriting changes from its usual precise loops into something more pressured and less controlled. The humor escalates during this period. The jokes multiply and grow stranger, the observations sharper, as if the jester costume has granted him a kind of permission to see himself from the outside with a clarity he could not previously sustain at the inside's close proximity. He comments on his own deterioration with the wry tenderness of someone narrating a character they love. He is aware of exactly what is happening to him. He can describe it precisely. And this awareness does not stop it from happening, which is perhaps the most honest thing the journals communicate. That seeing a thing clearly and being able to stop it are completely separate capacities, and losing one does not depend on the other. The laughter is not a symptom. This is important. It is a construction. It is what a person builds when the other available methods for surviving extreme solitude have been tried and have not been sufficient. It is a solution to a problem with no better solution, engineered by someone who is both too intelligent to be fooled and too alone to be helped. The jester costume is the same. He did not wear it because he was no longer rational. He wore it because wearing it gave him a role to inhabit, when the role of keeper, the only role he had left, was not providing enough scaffolding on its own. The bells and the paint are not evidence of breakdown. They are the visible infrastructure of survival. In the later journal entries, there are fragments of Dark Brotherhood history that nobody else retained. Rituals from the organization's founding period, contract methods from centuries back, names and details from legendary kills that exist nowhere else in the available record. He preserved these not systematically but urgently, the way you grab things from a fire, incompletely, in the order they surfaced, with the specific panic of someone watching irreplaceable things disappear into smoke. He is the last person who remembers. The history lives in him and in the journals, and if the journals are lost, it is simply gone. There is one entry near the end of the Cyrodiil period that players rarely quote, but that is the center of everything. He writes that he no longer knows which of his thoughts are his own, and which ones the Night Mother has placed there. He writes this without distress. He has given up the project of distinguishing them, he says. He has stopped trying to maintain the separation because it no longer feels honest. Because the separation implies that the devotion is something he added to himself, something external, and his experience is that it has become as interior as breathing. He is hers entirely, he writes, and at least that means he is someone's. He is someone's. After years of being nobodies, after watching every person who was supposed to be his leave or die, after talking to a coffin because the coffin was the only thing that stayed, after holding a religion together alone in an emptied building because there was nobody else left to hold it. To be someone's is something. It is the quietest, most devastating sentence in Skyrim's written materials. Not because it is dramatic, but because it is true, and because you can trace, through every entry in those journals, exactly what it cost him to arrive at it. When you meet him on the road with his cart and his bells, when you help him fix his wheel and watch him continue north with the coffin that is his entire world, you are arriving at the end of a story that was already almost complete. Your presence in it is late. The damage and the devotion both happened in empty rooms in Cyrodiil, in years of speaking to silence, in the slow, particular cracking of someone who simply held on longer than anyone should have had to hold because there was nobody else. He found a way to survive it. The way he found was unorthodox and strange and carried visible costs, but he found it. The Falkreath Sanctuary, when you reach it through the main Dark Brotherhood quest line, is where Cicero collides with the organization's present state, and the collision is painful in a specific way. Astrid's Brotherhood is pragmatic, contract-focused, operating by its own rules rather than the Night Mother's original ones. Cicero represents the old way, the sacred obligation, the divine hierarchy, the proper order of things as the Brotherhood was founded to observe. He is right about this. He is, in terms of the Brotherhood's own traditions, completely correct. And he is also, from Astrid's perspective, a destabilizing force who refuses to accept the reality of how things are now. Both of these things are true at once. The confrontation between them is not simply villain versus hero. It is two legitimate claims on what the organization is supposed to be, coming apart at the point where they cannot both be honored simultaneously. Cicero fights for something real. Astrid fights to protect something real. The fact that the questline positions you against Cicero in the Sanctuary does not make his position wrong. It makes the situation impossible, which is a different thing. And when the Night Mother eventually speaks, when she vindicates his decades of faith in the most literal possible way, the expression on his face is not triumph. It is relief so profound it resembles grief. He was right. She was there. All those years in the empty building. All those conversations with a coffin in a language nobody else was there to hear. He was not talking to silence. He was not broken for nothing. He was someone's all along. He just had to stay long enough for the proof to arrive. The thief who never stole enough. Vex is not a woman who invites questions. This is the first thing you understand about her. Not because she announces it directly, but because everything in her posture and word choice, and the specific quality of her professional manner, communicates it clearly enough that verbal confirmation would be redundant. She is stationed in the cistern beneath the Ragged Flagon in Riften, and when you encounter her early in the Thieves' Guild questline, she is sharp, competitive, and professional in the specific way of someone who has made competence into a wall rather than a foundation. Something to stand behind rather than something to stand on. She is, by any measurable standard, one of the finest thieves currently operating within the guild. Her reputation inside the organization is unambiguous. When other guild members mention her in passing, they do so with a respect that contains a slight edge of wariness, the way people speak about someone who is very good at something that could, theoretically, be turned against you. She runs her jobs with precision. She brings back results. She does not dramatize complications or request sympathy for the difficulty of her work. She delivers consistently, the kind of clean professional excellence that organizations come to rely on, and then to expect, which is its own particular form of being taken for granted, though it is not the form that causes her the most trouble. If you pay careful attention to the way Delvin Mallory talks about Vex, not when she is present and he is performing the collegial respect of a professional relationship, but in the passing references, the offhand texture of his familiarity, you begin to notice something. He speaks about her with a warmth that he may not fully realize is visible from the outside. He trusts her. He values her work genuinely. He is comfortable around her in the particular way of someone who has stopped considering what their comfort costs, who has never had to navigate the charged air between two people, when one of them is holding something the other is not. The room Vex keeps in the cistern is accessible if you look, and what you find there is the part of the picture that the professional surface conceals. There are papers, letters that are not addressed, not sealed, not in any condition of readiness. They are written and present and clearly composed at different times, and they are still there, not burned, not buried in the bottom of a chest, not disposed of in any of the ordinary ways a careful person disposes of things they have decided to be done with. She has written them and kept them, and they are in the room she sleeps in the place she returns to after the jobs are finished and the work is done. The cistern itself is worth sitting with as a physical space, because it tells you something about the community Vex has chosen to live inside. It is underground, lit by lanterns that burn at the same intensity regardless of the hour above. A world without dawn or dusk, without the natural rhythms that orient most people through their days. The guild members who live there have accepted a kind of temporal surrender. They move through professional cycles rather than daily ones, sleeping when jobs allow it, and waking when jobs require it. Organized around craft and contract rather than sun and season. For someone who needed to step completely outside the life she had before, who needed to put not just distance, but structural difference between herself and that life. The cistern's timelessness is not an inconvenience. It is part of the point. Down here, You are what you do and who you run jobs with, and nothing else has much purchase. The content, combined with dialogue fragments that surface, if you are patient enough to let the ambient guild conversations play out over multiple days, points towards something Vex has been carrying long enough that it has become structural. She came to the Thieves Guild in meaningful part because of Delvin, because there was something in him, his specific competence, the particular way he moved through the world, a directness and rough warmth she found worth orienting toward. And she became excellent in the way of someone who has a specific audience they are performing for, even if the audience does not know it is an audience. She became excellent. This is not a small thing. The guild treats it as simply what is expected of her now, which is how excellence tends to be treated once it becomes consistent. Not as an achievement that required years of sustained effort, but as a stable attribute, like the color of someone's hair. The dangerous jobs she continues to take, well beyond what financial necessity or reputational maintenance requires, are something else. Not performance for the guild, not proof for a skeptical senior member. The dangerous jobs are the ongoing argument she is having with a problem that does not have an argument-shaped solution. Maybe the right job, maybe the right level of difficulty, executed with the right precision, will finally produce the specific quality of regard she has been building toward. It will not. This is not a failure of perception on Delvin's part, so much as the simple and fairly brutal mechanics of how familiarity calcifies perception. He established his sense of her years ago, and that sense has been confirmed consistently enough to set into permanence. She is Vex. She is very good. She is his colleague and his friend, and someone he would not want to lose. These categories are full of genuine warmth. They are not the right shape. The unsent letters are the center of everything, and the most important thing about them is not their content, but their continued existence. She has written them, and she has not burned them. Not last night, not the night before, not in any of the nights since she wrote them. They are in the room she uses every day, which means that every day she makes a choice, without necessarily framing it as a choice, not to get rid of them. That ongoing choice is a refusal to finalize the feeling, to move it from present tense to past, to make it historical. She keeps them the way you keep a door unlocked that you no longer use, but cannot bring yourself to bolt. Not because you plan to use it, but because bolting it from the inside would mean admitting that the passage is closed, and that admission carries a weight that the unlocked door does not. The sharpness she turns on incoming guild recruits, the demanding precision of her professional evaluations, the impatience with failure, the slightly excessive quality of her standards for people she has only just met, is real. Her standards are genuinely high because she was trained well and takes her work seriously. But there is a secondary layer to the sharpness, a displaced quality, the edge of pain that has no professional outlet and no personal one either finding the nearest available surface. She is routinely in a kind of pain that the cistern's lantern light and the flow of jobs and the ongoing machinery of guild life are not quite sufficient to drown out. And the sharpness is what the pain looks like when there is nowhere specific to put it. When you complete her job successfully, when you bring back results she did not expect from a new recruit, when she offers the particular precise praise she reserves for genuine accomplishment. There is a quality to the moment that is almost unbearable if you are paying attention. The praise is real. There is no falseness in it. But Delvin notices too. He says so with that particular warmth he reserves for people who earn his genuine regard. He mentions your name with the approval she has been building toward for years, and she is there for that. She watches it. She says nothing, because there is nothing to say, because the thing she has been trying to produce is being produced, just not aimed in the direction she spent years trying to aim it. She is the one who trained you well enough to earn it. She is, in the most quietly awful way, the instrument of her own exclusion from the thing she was working toward. She stays. She runs her jobs. She lives in the underground amber of the cistern, in a world of professional excellence and private want that she has been carrying long enough that she no longer consciously experiences it as weight. It has simply become the weather of her interior life, the condition in which she operates. The letters are still in her room. She did not burn them this week or last week. She has kept them through jobs that should have killed her, through years of an organization that values her completely as a professional and not quite enough as a person. She keeps them as evidence that she felt something real, that it happened, that it was not nothing, against the possibility of some future version of events that the available evidence does not currently support. There is one more layer to this, and it comes at the end of the main Thieves Guild questline, when the guild is restored to its former standing, and Brynjolf becomes guild master, and the cistern fills again with the energy of an organization that has found its footing. It is by any measure a good outcome. The guild is healthier, the members safer, the contracts flowing again, and Vex is a part of that restoration. Her work contributed to it. Her consistency through the lean years when the guild was failing was one of the things that kept it functional enough to be worth saving. She helped build this. When the guild stands back on its feet, Vex's fingerprints are all over the foundation. Delvin is happy. He is genuinely, visibly pleased in the way of someone whose idealism has been unexpectedly validated. The guild is what he wanted it to be again, and the people he cares about are safe, and everything he was afraid of losing did not get lost. He thanks Vex in his way, the warm, collegial way of a man who values his colleagues. She accepts it in her way, the precise professional way of someone who does not make a display of things. And the distance between those two ways of receiving the same moment is exactly the distance it has always been. The guild being restored does not close it. Nothing that is happening in the cistern closes it. She will keep running jobs in a healthier guild, will keep carrying the letters in a room with better light, will keep being excellent at the thing she came here to do, for reasons that the thing itself was never entirely the point of. The girl she buried. There is a woman in the Thieves Guild who does not have a name. Not really. The name she uses, Sapphire, belongs to a gem she stole, and she chose it the way you choose a new coat. When the old one is too damaged to wear, it covers her, it keeps the cold out. But it is not what she was born with, and the person who was born with that original name is someone she made a deliberate, sustained effort to leave behind. When you first meet her in the cistern beneath the ragged flagon, she is leaning against the stonework with the economy of motion of someone who has learned that stillness is safer than restlessness, watching the room with the particular attentiveness of someone who has had reasons to watch rooms. She is beautiful in the way of people who have used their appearance as a tool long enough to have complicated feelings about it. She is sharp. She is immediately and unambiguously dangerous in a way that she makes no effort to conceal. She does not want to talk to you. Not at first, not genuinely. She will give you guild business when you need it, will tell you what needs stealing and where to bring the proceeds, will evaluate your work with the specific competence of someone who has done a great deal of it. but the wall around the personal is solid and actively maintained. If you try to ask about her past, she shuts the door with the practiced efficiency of someone who has closed it thousands of times. Her standard response to curiosity about her history is a threat that does not sound like a performance. She has made people regret asking. She is communicating a fact, not issuing a dare. What you can learn, if you are patient and present in the right moments, through scraps of overheard conversation, through the particular way she flinches at certain topics before catching herself, through the picture her reactions paint in negative space, is that Sapphire grew up on a farm. This is the detail that sits most incongruously against the woman you see in the cistern, and it is precisely that incongruity that makes it the hinge of everything. She was a farm girl, somewhere in the wide rural nothing of Skyrim's middle provinces. She had parents, presumably. She had a childhood that was at some point simply a childhood and not yet a wound. Then bandits came. This is where most players stop, because the game does not volunteer more than this. She mentions bandits, she mentions what happened, and the terrible compression of those few words is designed to communicate a volume that she cannot and will not say in full. What happened to her family is in the shape of the silence around the statement. What happened to her in the aftermath is in the quality of the way she carries herself. Not tentatively, not with the visible tremor of someone who has never recovered, but with the controlled, deliberate hardness of someone who recovered by becoming a different person entirely. Recovery for Sapphire did not look like healing. It looked like replacement. She made her way to Riften eventually, which is where you go when you have nothing, and you need to survive in a place where having nothing is somewhat less fatal than elsewhere. She learned to fight. She learned to steal. She found the guild, or the guild found her, and the guild had the particular utility for someone in her position of being an institution that rewards exactly the skills that trauma and survival teach. She was already good at watching exits. She was already good at reading rooms for threat. She was already capable of decisive violence when it became necessary. The guild took what she had built out of necessity and gave it professional application and a home in the cistern. The name came later, Sapphire. She does not explain where she found the specific gem, or whether it was a specific gem at all. The name might be older than that, might come from some earlier self-invention along the road between the farm and the Ragged Flagon. What matters about it is the function it serves, and the function is erasure. There is no public record of who she was before. No one in the guild uses a name from her past, because no one in the guild knows a name from her past. She has surrounded herself with people who only know the version of her that she built after. And in that environment, she can be almost entirely the person she decided to become, rather than the one she was. Almost entirely. The wall around her past is high and consistent and actively patrolled. But the wall is there precisely because something is on the other side of it that she cannot afford to have accessed. The force of the maintenance tells you something. You do not build walls that strong around things that no longer matter. The level of vigilance she brings to protecting the past suggests the past is still alive somewhere inside the present, still capable of damage if it surfaces, still requiring active containment rather than having simply faded. Here is where the Dragonborn DLC introduces the piece of the picture that most players never connect back to her. A letter. In Soulstime, if you find Glover Mallory, a blacksmith in Raven Rock, Delvin's brother, and as it turns out Sapphire's biological father, he gives you a letter after you complete a job for him. The letter is a confession written across years of avoidance. Glover, it emerges, actually recognized Sapphire when he saw her in Riften. He knew who she was. He could not bring himself to approach her, could not find words for what he had done and what had happened to her family in his absence. And so he left, not Riften, but Skyrim entirely, and settled on Solstheim, carrying the knowledge of who she was and where she was and the inability to say any of it to her face. The letter is what he could manage instead. Words on paper, sent through a stranger, delivered at a remove from the conversation he could not have. Raven Rock is itself a place of diminished expectations, an ash-covered settlement on an island racked by the eruption of Red Mountain generations ago, and that the island has never fully recovered from. Glover is competent there, respected, but he is also clearly a man who chose distance over confrontation. The letter he asks you to deliver has the quality of something revised many times. Words chosen with care that indicates they were chosen more than once. A man trying to say something for which no phrasing feels adequate. He's been carrying it for years. He knew where she was and could not face her. And so he did what people do when a direct conversation is impossible. He found the oblique path. The stranger who could carry the message he could not deliver himself. She was separated from him before she was born. He left the farm when he found out her mother was pregnant. Not ready for that life. He went back 15 years later and found the farm mostly destroyed. No one around, and no way to know what had become of anyone. The letter explains this. It explains that he is ashamed. It explains that he does not expect forgiveness. And now he has the means to send it, and he has sent it, and it is in your hands, and you can bring it to her. When you deliver the letter, she does not read it in front of you. She takes it. She holds it. She looks at it for a moment with an expression that breaks briefly through the wall, before she puts the wall back up. Something raw and complicated passing across her face in the space between receiving the paper and composing herself again. She says she will read it later. She says she does not want to talk about it. She gives you an exquisite sapphire, a unique gem worth considerably more than any ordinary reward, as payment for the delivery. And the specificity of it, the particular stone she chooses, is either coincidence or the game making a very quiet point about what she chose to name herself. She does not elaborate. The quest ends there in terms of mechanics, but the picture it assembles is one of the most quietly devastating in Skyrim if you hold all the pieces together at once. A woman who renamed herself after something precious and cold and hard, who built a new identity over the ruins of the old one, who has been living in an underground cistern surrounded by professional criminals who are, in their way, the closest thing she has to family, and who just received a letter from a father who has been looking for her, whose existence she's had to decide whether to acknowledge or keep behind the wall with everything else. She does not tell you what she decides. She does not let you see the decision being made. She takes the letter and she goes back to the wall, and whatever happens on the other side of it happens in a room you do not have access to, in the privacy that she has been protecting at great cost for the entirety of her adult life. The name she chose, sitting on top of all of this, carries a weight it does not announce. She named herself after a gem because gems are valuable and beautiful and impervious to the things that damage softer materials. She named herself after something that cannot be hurt the way she was hurt. She named herself after what she was trying to become. And the letter from her father, resting in her hands in the amber light of the cistern, is asking her to remember what she was before she decided to become something that could not be broken, to reach back through the wall to the girl she buried and decide whether she is willing to excavate. There are 2 futures available to her now, and the game gives you neither one to watch. In one of them, she reads the letter, and then she reads it again, and then she finds a courier and sends a reply to Raven Rock, and somewhere on a volcanic island, a blacksmith who has been carrying not knowing for years finally gets to set it down. In the other, she tucks the letter into the same place she keeps the things she is not yet ready to be done with and not yet ready to act on, alongside whatever else lives in that room's quieter corners. And she goes back to her jobs and her standards and her wall, because the wall has been the whole architecture of her survival, and taking any part of it down is a structural question she is not ready to answer. The game leaves both futures equally open. It gives you the sapphire she pays you with, cold and clear and without explanation, and trusts you to hold it for a moment before you move on. She keeps the letter. That, at least, is something. The bottle and the answer. Wendhelm has 2 kinds of sadness. There is the public sadness, the Grey Quarter, the murder investigations, the political tension coiling through every conversation in the Palace of the Kings, the kind of grief that has become civic infrastructure. And then there is the private kind, the kind that lives in the Candlehearth Hall at a specific seat near the fire, in a man named Ranmir, who's been drinking himself to death, in full view of everyone who knows him and nobody who is trying to stop him. You will encounter Ranmir early in any extended stay in Windhelm, because the Candlehearth Hall is where you go for lodging and meals, and Ranmir is there with the reliability of permanent furniture. He's already drinking when you arrive, regardless of the hour. He is not loud about it, not belligerent in the way of some drunks. He is quiet, which is in some ways worse. He sits and he drinks, and he watches the fire with the expression of someone who has been watching fires for a long time and has nothing particularly new to think about them. If you speak to him, he will speak to you. He is not hostile. He is not performing the theatrical dissolution of a man who wants to be noticed. He is simply very far away, in the particular interior distance of someone who has chosen to be somewhere other than the present moment, and has put considerable resources into maintaining that choice. The inn moves around him, conversations at other tables, the warmth of the hearth, the sound of Windhelm outside in the cold, and none of it quite reaches him where he is. He will mention Isabel. He will mention her in the way people mention the thing that is wrong with them when they are drunk enough, that the pretense of normalcy is no longer worth the energy it requires. Isabel was his lover. She is gone. He says she left him, that she went away, that she found someone better. His language about this shifts depending on how drunk he is and what version of the story he has decided to inhabit on any given day. What is consistent is the depth of it. This is not the casual grief of a relationship that ended badly. This is something that has reorganized his entire relationship with the future, that has made the future seem like a room he has no particular reason to enter. The optional quest associated with him, one of those threads you find by talking to the right person at the right moment, a Windhelm local named Innkeeper Susanna, or one of the other residents who have been watching Ranmir dissolve for long enough to have opinions about it, sends you looking for information about what actually happened to Isabel, not what Ranmir thinks happened. What happened? The two turn out to be different things. Isabel Rolain did not leave Ranmir. She did not find someone better or simply decide she was done. She was murdered. Her body is in a location you have to find, and finding it requires following a trail of information that loops through Windhelm's various corners and dead ends, through conversations with people who knew her and the places she frequented, until you arrive at the physical evidence of what she was doing in the days before she died and what that doing cost her. The trail itself is worth paying attention to as an experience, because what it does is reconstruct Isabel as a person rather than as an absence. You are not looking for a body. You are retracing the last weeks of someone's life. And the picture that assembles along the way is of someone who was not passive, not resigned, not quietly waiting for things to improve. She was moving. She was making arrangements. She had spoken to specific people, left evidence in specific places, made decisions that had a logic you can follow once you know what you are following. The quest gives her a character that Ranmir's grief cannot, because grief flattens the people it is about into the shape of the loss. The investigation gives Isabel back her dimension. She was trying to get them out. This is the shape of what the evidence assembles into. She had a plan. She was working towards something. She was acquiring the means to take her and Ranmir somewhere better. Somewhere away from the grinding hopelessness of Windhelm winters and Wanhelm poverty, and the specific stuckness of people who have been in a difficult place long enough that they have started to believe the place is who they are. She was trying to build an exit. Whatever that plan involved, whoever it required her to deal with, the deal went wrong. She died before she could tell him. She died without being able to leave a message or a note or any version of events that would give him the shape of what actually happened instead of the jagged shapelessness of simply not knowing. Her body, when you find it, still has the evidence of what she was doing. Letters or gold or items that tell the story of someone who was moving towards something rather than away from something. The detail that makes this different from a simple disappearance. She was not running from him. She was running toward a version of their life that she had seen clearly enough to work for it. She died pointed in the direction of the thing she wanted most. When you bring Ranmir the truth, when you sit down across from him with the information that changes the story from abandonment to loss, the moment does not land the way closure is supposed to land. He does not stand up straighter. He does not set down the drink and say that finally, now that he knows, he can move forward. The knowledge changes the shape of the grief, but not the weight of it. In some ways, it changes the weight upward, because abandonment at least implies that she chose, that she made a decision, that somewhere she is still alive and living a different life. Murder removes even that cold comfort. She is not somewhere else. She is nowhere. She was trying to save them both, and the world stopped her, and he was sitting in the candle hearth hall drinking while it happened, not knowing, unable to help, because he did not even know help was needed. This is the specific horror at the center of Ranmir's story, that the version of events he had been living with, she left me, she found someone better, was painful and humiliating, but contained a margin of survivability. In the abandoned by her version, she is still alive. She made a choice, and the choice did not include him, and that is its own wound. But the wound has a comprehensible shape. The true version has no survivable margin. She is dead. She was killed in the process of trying to make their life better. She was reaching toward the future, and the future reached back and took her. His drinking, after you tell him, does not stop. This is what the game shows you if you return to the Candlehearth Hall in the days following the revelation. Ranmir is still there, still at the same seat near the fire, still in the same interior distance. The truth did not repair him. It changed the quality of what he is carrying, from the burning humiliation of rejection to the cold of bereavement. But the carrying continues. He is a man who has been handed the thing he thought he wanted, an explanation, a true accounting, a version of events that restores Isabel's love for him, and discovered that having the explanation does not make the absence smaller. She is still gone. The explanation is a different shape of gone. What makes his story specifically devastating, beyond the central facts of it, is the mundane completeness of his deterioration. He is not a warrior destroyed by a grand tragedy. He is not a mage whose powers abandoned him or a soldier broken by a specific battle. He is a man in a tavern chair, unremarkable, present in a city that is full of people with larger visible sorrows, drinking himself through days that he is not sure he wants to complete. Most players pass him a dozen times without activating his quest. He exists as ambient detail, as the figure in the corner of a place you pass through. His tragedy is not announced. It sits in a chair and watches the fire and waits for someone to notice, and usually no one does, and the days keep passing regardless. What makes Windhelm particularly cruel as a setting for this story is that the city is too loud for Ranmir's kind of grief. Windhelm grieves at volume. It grieves Torig. It grieves the war dead. It grieves Nordic tradition and Stormcloak casualties and the loss of an imagined past. Those are the griefs that get speeches and memorials and guard dialogue. The grief of a man who lost a woman to a bad deal gone wrong. A plan that was trying to get two people somewhere better. That grief does not make the rotation. It sits in the Candlehearth Hall among all the other ordinary pain of ordinary people in a city at war, receiving the same amount of attention that ordinary pain always receives, which is very little, and which the city does not particularly feel guilty about. He will still be there when you leave Windhelm, in whatever state he is in. The Candlehearth Hall will have its fire and its other patrons and its general noise, and Ranmir will be somewhere in it, having the same long conversation with a bottle about something the bottle cannot explain and will not fix. The fire will burn. The snow outside will keep doing what the snow always does. And somewhere under the ice of Windhelm's particular winter, Isabel is still pointing toward a future she never reached. Her direction preserved in the evidence you found, the love she had for him made physical and findable, and one of the saddest things in the entire game. The heir who couldn't know. Riften is a city of performed identities. The merchants perform respectability while fencing stolen goods. The guards perform authority while collecting guild payments. Maven Blackbriar performs civic benevolence while running what is essentially a private government. And in the middle of the market, on most days, there is a Dunmer man named Bran Shay, who performs the ordinary role of a struggling merchant with the unself-conscious sincerity of someone who is not performing anything, who is simply, genuinely, a man trying to sell goods in a difficult market in a city that does not particularly favor people who look like him. You encounter Bran Shay early in the Thieves Guild questline, because Brynjolf's opening con in the market requires you to plant stolen goods on someone, and Bran Shay is the designated fool. You distract the market, Brynjolf runs his scheme, and the planted evidence lands Bran Shay in Riften's jail for a stretch of days. The game treats this as setup for the main questline, a minor moral compromise to establish the guild's willingness to harm innocents, a detail meant to show you the flavor of what you're getting into. Most players do it, frame Bran Shay, and forget about him within minutes. Bran Shay does not forget. When he gets out of jail and returns to his market stall, he is shaken in the specific way of someone for whom being arrested was not a routine inconvenience, but a rupture. Proof that the ground he thought he was standing on can disappear without warning. That the fragile stability he has built in Riften can be dismantled by forces entirely outside his control. He talks about it if you engage him. He talks about wanting to understand his past, about a search for his origins that has been ongoing for years and that the jail time interrupted. He is not angry at you because he does not know it was you. He is simply continuing to carry the thing he has always been carrying, with the additional weight of a recent reminder that the world is not on his side. The quest he opens, if you choose to help him, if you notice the thread he is offering and follow it, is about his origins. Bran Shay was not raised by Dunmer parents. He was raised by Argonians, in the way of an orphan passed along by people who chose to take him in, rather than people who were obligated to. The Argonians who raised him did so with apparent love. He does not speak of a cold or difficult childhood in those terms. He was cared for. But he was also always aware that there was a story before the story he knew, a set of circumstances that placed a Dunmer infant in Argonian hands that nobody has ever fully explained to him. And the not knowing has been a presence in his life for as long as he can remember. The quest sends you to find a specific journal, not held by a caravan network or archived anywhere safe, but lying in the wreck of a ship off the coast of Winterhold. The ship was the pride of Tel Vos. It sank carrying survivors from Morrowind, and Limdren Telvanni's journal went down with it, preserved in a chest underwater for decades, waiting. Finding it means diving into cold northern waters near the wreck east of Winterhold, working through the bandits who have claimed the site, and retrieving a document that has been sitting at the bottom of the sea since before Bran Shay had a name. What you eventually bring back to him is the answer. He is the last known survivor of the Telvanni bloodline, the founding family from which House Telvanni took its name. His father was Limdren Telvanni, a member of one of Morrowind's great magical houses, the one famous for its mushroom towers and its deliberate insularity, and its mages who achieved lifespans that push into centuries through magical extension. House Telvanni was not a house that involved itself in the politics of other peoples. It cultivated power internally, in the slow and patient way of institutions that measure time in generations of mage lords rather than years of kings. Its towers rose above the ash wastes of Morrowind, enormous and organic, grown rather than built. The physical expression of a philosophy that prized self-sufficiency above all else, that believed magic was its own justification and power its own governance. What destroyed that world was not the Oblivion Crisis, but what came after it. In the early years of the Fourth Era, the Argonians, having suffered centuries of enslavement under the Dunmer, invaded Morrowind in an event called the Accession War. Red Mountain had already erupted, Vardenfell was burning, and Morrowind was fractured and weakened. The Argonian forces under the Unsolved drove deep into Telvanni territory. Limdren survived long enough to send his infant son away. He entrusted the child to his wet nurse, Hydria Olin, who boarded the Pride of Tel Vos to carry the baby to safety in Skyrim. Limdren himself did not make it. The ship wrecked on the northeastern coast near Winterhold. The nurse was lost. The infant was found by an Argonian couple who took him in, brought him to Blackmarsh, and raised him as Bran Shay. House Telvanni as an institution did not end. Neloth still holds his tower on Solstheim, and the house still has presence in Morrowind. But the Telvanni family bloodline came down, through a shipwreck and a stranger's kindness, to one man selling goods in Riften's market. The journal explains the specifics of all this. It is Limdrin's own written account, the document he was keeping so that his son would one day know his heritage. It explains who his parents were. It explains the accession war and what it cost. It explains what the nurse was instructed to do and how the wreck changed everything. And it explains, in the way of a father writing for a child he knows he may not see again, that none of what happened was the child's fault, and that the bloodline, however scattered, was worth being born into. What this means for Branchet, on the day you bring him the journal, is quietly enormous. The journal is in your hands before it is in his. You are the first person to hold the answer to the question he has been asking his entire life, and the answer, when he reads it, does not deliver the comfortable homecoming that the question always implies. It delivers a history that is beautiful and terrible in equal measure. A bloodline of considerable standing in Morrowind's history, a father who loved him enough to send him away so he would survive, a wreck that scattered everything, an Argonian family that raised him with care without ever being able to tell him the full truth. It is not a story about a house he can return to or a tower he can claim. House Telvanni still exists in some form, and Branchet almost certainly has no formal standing within its structure. What he has is the knowledge of his own name and where it came from, and the weight of a lineage that is almost impossible to do anything with in the present day. He does not leap up and announce himself. He does not ride south to reclaim towers that are almost certainly gone. He sits with the journal, and he reads it, and the quest closes without fanfare, without a dramatic cutscene, without the kind of triumphant resolution that the structure of a quest like this seems to call for. What he has received is not a gift, it is context. The context is enormous, and he is a man standing in a market stall in Riften, with a name he chose for himself, and an identity built from 30-odd years of living without this information, and the information does not replace any of that. It sits on top of it, or underneath it, and he has to figure out what to do with both layers at once. The quiet irony that the game trusts you to notice without pointing at it is this. You framed him, you put him in jail. The guild sent you to do exactly the thing to Branchet that the people who protected his secret were afraid the world would do. Removed him from his routine, disrupted his stability, made him visible in a way that drew official attention. You did this before you knew who he was. You did it as part of your own story, your own initiation into a criminal organization, a minor transaction that meant nothing to you and cost him days of his life in a Riften cell. Then you came back in a completely separate context and found the answer to the question he has been asking since childhood. This is one of those intersections that Skyrim creates between its quest threads without ever announcing the intersection, the kind that requires you to be doing both things, to hold both experiences in memory, to make the connection yourself. Most players never do. They frame Branchet in one playthrough, never talk to him in depth, never follow the trail he offers. Or they do his quest but never think back to the market distraction at the start of the guild questline. The full picture requires both, and the full picture is of someone whose history was stolen from him before he was born, whose protection from that stolen history involved being kept in the dark, whose daily life in Riften is a monument to surviving without knowing your own foundations, and who, at the end of the quest, knows his foundations at last and discovers they are made of ash and grief and love, and one of the most dramatic lineages in Tamrielic history, sitting quietly under the surface of a man selling goods at a market stall in a city famous for its corruption. And Riften, of all places. That is worth sitting with too. The Telvanni world was one of towers and magical isolation and centuries-long ambitions and mages who shaped stone by force of will. Its architecture was organic and vast and pointed upward, away from ordinary concerns into the pure elevation of power and knowledge. People born into that lineage stood, in theory, apart from the common systems of Tamriel's social life. And the last survivor of that founding bloodline sells goods in Riften's market, in the city most synonymous with small-scale corruption and municipal failure, in the shadow of the Thieves' Guild's commercial interests, and Maven Blackbriar's quiet tyranny, paying whatever taxes the guards extract from Argonian and Dunmer merchants because he is not a mage lord's recognized heir in any world that currently functions. He is Brandshay. He is a man with a stall and a hard luck history, and a search for his origins that just found an answer so large he may not be able to hold it. Riften does not care about Telvanni Towers. Riften cares about whether you can make your payments to whoever currently controls the docks. The gap between what his bloodline once represented and where he actually stands is one of the most purely, specifically Skyrim-flavored ironies in the game. Not played for comedy, not played for drama, just sitting there in the market square like everything else Riften keeps in plain view and never explains. He will be there when you come back to Riften. He will be at his stall, doing what he does, carrying what he carries. If you talk to him after the quest, he has a different quality, not visibly transformed, not suddenly wearing his lineage-like armor, but present in a way that suggests he is still in the process of deciding what to do with what he knows. That process may take years. It may never fully complete. House Telvanni still exists in some form, but not in any way that has a place for him. He was raised Argonian in Black Marsh, and Mage Lord society does not fold easily around a merchant who grew up without his name. What he inherited is not power or property or a title that anyone living will honor. What he inherited is the knowledge of where he came from and the weight of a history that was kept from him by people who loved him enough to keep it, and the question of what, if anything, a person does with that. It is not a question with a simple answer. It may not have an answer at all. Only the ongoing daily fact of being someone who now knows, living alongside all the years of being someone who did not. The Steward's invisible chains, Riften's mist veil. Keep sits above the city's endemic corruption, with the particular dignity of a building that has been trying for a long time to mean something. Jarl Layla, lawgiver, holds her court there with the genuine belief that she is governing, that the decisions made in her hall have weight, that her authority is real, that the city responds to her leadership the way cities are supposed to respond to leaders. She is wrong, in the specific way of people whose wrongness is maintained for them, by people who benefit from the maintenance. The person doing most of the maintenance is Unraveling, her steward. You meet Unraveling early in any substantive time spent in Riften. She is the person who handles the administrative machinery of Layla's rule. The correspondence, the appointments, the practical arrangements that keep a Jarl's household functional and a Jarl's government appearing to function. She is competent in the visible ways, organized, articulate, well presented, with the slightly formal manner of someone who has learned to wear professional distance as part of their working clothes. If you need something from Riften's official structure, she is who you speak to. She is, in the traditional sense of the word, exactly what a steward is supposed to be. The letters in her quarters, accessible if you enter the keep with appropriate permissions or appropriate stealth, tell a different story. They are not from Layla. They are from Maven Blackbriar. And they do not read like correspondence between a merchant and a public official. They read like instructions. Maven Blackbriar is Riften's true power, in the way that true power often operates. Not through the official channels that everyone can see, but through the channels that run behind the visible ones, through the people positioned at the hinge points who can redirect the flow of decisions without anyone in the official structure noticing the redirection. She controls the Thieves Guild's commercial operations. She controls significant portions of Riften's economy. She controls the guards through mechanisms that are open secrets. And she controls Unraveling through something the letters only gesture at, but do not fully name. The something is leverage. Maven holds material that would end Unraveling's position and reputation if it became known. The specifics of what that material is remain in the shadow the game casts, without fully illuminating, but the nature of the control is clear from its effects. Unraveling does not serve Maven because she was hired to, or because she agrees with Maven's interests, or because she has been persuaded that Maven's vision for Riften is the correct one. She serves Maven because she has no choice. The alternative to serving Maven is the destruction of everything she has built in this keep, in this city, in the position she has constructed over years of careful professional work. Maven is not paying her. Maven is holding her. What makes Maven's particular kind of power interesting? And what makes Unraveling's captivity within it so complete? Is that it is indistinguishable from the outside from a normal working relationship. You walk into Mistvale Keep and you see a Jarl and her steward. You see an administrative structure functioning in the way administrative structures are supposed to function. The decisions being made look like decisions. The advice being given looks like advice. There is no visible mechanism of coercion, no chain, no guard. The coercion is structural rather than physical, built into Unraveling's understanding of what happens if she stops cooperating. And that understanding keeps her in line far more effectively than anything visible could. Maven does not need to be in the room. Maven does not need to be watching. Unraveling knows what she knows, and knowledge of consequences is its own kind of constant supervision. This distinction matters enormously for how you understand what you are looking at when you see Unraveling doing her job. Every piece of advice she gives Layla, every administrative decision she facilitates, every appointment she arranges, and every piece of information she manages, all of it is passing through the filter of Maven's instructions before it reaches Layla's ears. Layla governs, in her own mind, with the counsel of a trusted and competent steward. What she actually governs with is the counsel of a woman who has been turned into a conduit for the interests of the person who is effectively running the city, who is doing so while Layla sits in the hall above and sincerely believes she is in charge. Unraveling knows exactly what she is doing. This is the weight she carries that most players never look at closely enough to feel. She is not confused about the situation. She does not maintain comforting fictions about the nature of her service. The letters, the ones that are her record of the arrangement, kept because they are leverage in the other direction perhaps, or kept because disposing of Maven's written instructions carries its own risks. Reveal a person who sees the architecture of her own captivity with complete clarity and continues to function within it because the alternative is worse. She is competent enough to know precisely how trapped she is. She is intelligent enough to understand that her intelligence, which got her into this position, is also the very thing that Maven found worth controlling. The exit available to her when you sit with her situation and consider them honestly, mostly lead nowhere survivable. Exposing Maven means exposing herself. Her cooperation with Maven's instructions, however coerced, is still a matter of record, and the record would be the first thing presented at any hearing. Refusing Maven's instructions means whatever Maven holds gets released, which means the end of her position and her reputation, and possibly more. Leaving Riften means abandoning the only professional life she has, running from something with a very long reach into a world where her qualifications and connections are anchored in a city she can no longer safely occupy. Every door she could open leads into worse weather. So she stays. She manages the correspondence and the appointments and the administrative machinery. And she does it well, because doing it well is the only part of her situation she can control. Her excellence in the visible functions of her role is not compensation or delusion. It is the last territory she fully owns. Maven controls what she says. Maven controls the advice she gives. Maven controls the shape of Riften's governance through the mechanism of Anuriel's position. But the quality of the work itself, the precision and competence of the stewardship, that is still hers. It is a small sovereignty. It is what is left. When Imperials take Riften during the Civil War questline, and Maven is formally installed as Jarl, the outcome that confirms what was always functionally true, Anuriel's situation becomes official in a way that changes its texture without changing its substance. The covert arrangement becomes the public structure. Maven no longer needs an intermediary because Maven is now simply in the position that the intermediary was shaping toward all along. What happens to Unravel in this version of the future is the game's most quietly honest statement about what leverage does to the people it works on. It uses them until it no longer needs to, and then it continues not needing to, and the thing that was the entire architecture of their captivity simply dissolves because it became unnecessary. She is not freed. She is made irrelevant by the completion of the project she was coerced into serving. The tragedy in Anuriel's story is not the coercion itself, though the coercion is real and the weight of it is visible if you look. It is the particular quality of her position as the person closest to the harm, who is also the person least able to address it. She watches Layla govern with the misplaced confidence of someone who does not know what she does not know. She watches Riften function under Maven's actual governance, while the official version of that governance is performed in the hall above. She knows the difference between the performance and the reality because she is the mechanism through which the performance is maintained, and she cannot tell anyone what she knows because telling would require a kind of self-destruction she has not been able to choose. There is a particular quality to being trusted by someone you are betraying that the game does not name, but that Anuriel's situation makes visible if you pay attention. Layla trusts her, not performatively, not with the contingent wariness of a ruler who suspects her court. She trusts Anuriel with the full, sincere confidence of someone who has found a capable and loyal steward, and considers herself fortunate. That trust is visibly genuine when you observe them together. Layla defers to Anuriel's administrative judgment with the ease of someone who has never had reason to doubt it. She shares things with her. She relies on her. And Anuriel receives all of that trust and carries it alongside the knowledge of exactly how it is being used, because Layla's trust is the instrument of Layla's exploitation. The more Layla trusts Anuriel, the more effectively Maven's instructions can be implemented without Layla noticing. Anuriel's trustworthiness, in Layla's eyes, is the mechanism of her betrayal. The one reinforces the other, and Anuriel has to watch this happen every day in the hall above the city that Maven quietly runs. There is something in that particular arrangement that goes beyond ordinary corruption. Ordinary corruption involves people who know they are corrupt and have made peace with it, or who do not think about it. Anuriel's version involves being very clearly, very consciously aware of exactly what she is doing to someone who does not deserve it, with no way out of doing it, while that person continues to offer her trust with an openness that makes the whole thing worse. She lives between two truths, able to see both, unable to speak either one. That is its own particular kind of ruin, quiet and functional, and barely visible to anyone who does not read the letters. The hunt that never ends. There is a portrait of Ayla the Huntress that the game assembles from surfaces, and it is a compelling portrait. Fierce, competent, proud, a warrior who embraces the nature of the wolf with a totemic conviction that most of her companion brothers find admirable, or at least comprehensible. She moves through Whiterun and the plains around Joravaska with the ease of someone who knows exactly who she is and has organized her entire life around that knowledge. She hunts, she runs, she fights, she is, in the very specific sense of someone who has found the role that fits them, in her element. The surface is consistent and it is real. She is exactly who she appears to be. The part that the surface does not show is the reason she became exactly who she appears to be. The companion's relationship with lycanthropy is one of the game's more interesting pieces of institutional culture, because it is not uniform. The beast blood was given to the companions generations ago through a deal with the Daedric Lord Heir, and that deal has never sat entirely easily within the circle, the inner group of companions who carry the wolf. Codlac Whitemane, the Harbinger, wants to be free of it. He has spent years pursuing a cure, not for himself alone but on principle, because he believes the wolf will prevent him from reaching Sovngarde when he dies. Several other companions share versions of his ambivalence. The beast is power, they acknowledge, but it is also a leash, and the question of who holds the leash when a companion transforms is one that the organization has never fully resolved. Among all of them, Ayla is the outlier, the one who does not want the cure, who argues against it, who frames the beast as gift rather than burden with a conviction so complete it reads as foundational rather than chosen. You encounter Ayla first as a companion, as one of the veterans who evaluates the incoming recruit, which is to say you, with the particular sharpness of someone whose professional judgment has been tested enough to be trusted. She is not warm exactly in the early stages of the relationship. She does not perform warmth in the way that some companions do. She is direct, occasionally impatient, generous with respect when she decides it is earned, and notably withholding of it when she has not yet decided. If you win her respect, which requires time and demonstrated competence, she becomes someone who is willing to be known in a way she is not available for with people who have not cleared that bar. She talks about the hunt. She talks about the beast blood. She talks about the companions with a loyalty that has the quality of something she has chosen rather than something she fell into. What she does not fully explain, and what the game only partially surfaces, is why her embrace of the beast blood has the quality it does. Not merely preference, but something closer to necessity. Listen to how she talks about it. She does not say the beast blood is useful or that it makes her stronger. Though both things are true, she says it is a gift. She frames it in the language of blessing, of rightness, of something that belongs to her in a way that going without it never would, That register, gift, not tool, is worth paying attention to because it goes further than the situation requires. You do not call something a gift unless you need it to be one. The game gives you the context to read this. Ayla grew up in the Companions, the daughter of a companion mother who died before seeing her join. She was shaped by this world from childhood. She carries the beast blood not as an adult choice made from a position of full knowledge, but as a thing that was always going to be part of her, woven into the fabric of who she was becoming. What you witness during the questline itself, the secret hunts with Steward that the other companions quietly disapprove of, the night transformations, the refusal to even entertain the possibility of the cure, points towards someone for whom the wolf is not separate from the self, but continuous with it. Removing it would not be subtraction, it would be amputation. But the specific intensity of her position, the way it reads as armor rather than simply preference, opens a question that the game does not answer, but does allow you to ask. When she and Steward go out at night in beast form, they go to hunt. Hunting is what she understands. Hunting is what she controls. The transformation for her is structured around this: a purpose, a target, a discipline. What the wolf is capable of outside that structure, without the focus of a hunt, in a situation that goes differently than intended, the game leaves that space open, in the way it leaves many things open. The question of what she might be carrying from years of living as the wolf, what the beast has done that the hunter cannot fully account for, is something the player can wonder about without the game confirming or denying it. That ambiguity is not accidental. It is what makes her refusal to cure feel like something more than a personality trait. What she does with whatever she carries, what the game shows you in the version you can actually play, is refusal. She refuses to cure the beast blood. When the companions go through the ritual to remove lycanthropy, when Codlak Whitemane spends years trying to find the way to die clean and reach Sovngarde without the wolf attached to his soul, Ayla does not participate. She is the one companion who actively wants to maintain the beast blood, who frames this as strength rather than affliction, who can sound almost evangelical about the rightness of what she is. Other companions who know her well do not entirely buy the evangelism, but they do not push. She is Ayla. This is what she is. Asking her to be different feels like asking the plains to be a forest. What fits together? Her insistence on the beast, her avoidance of the cure, the particular fervor of her advocacy for lycanthropy, could be read as a portrait of someone using ideology as architecture. If the wolf is something she chose, something she celebrates, something she has organized her entire identity around defending, then whatever the wolf has done becomes not failure but cost. The price of something she valued highly enough to keep paying for. That reframing would make the continuing possible. It is, at the very least, a reading the game supports, even if it does not insist on it. If she admitted the wolf blood was a curse, if she stood in the circle with the others and accepted the cure and walked out the other side clean and human, she would have to stand in that cleanness with a human conscience and ask what the years of transformation cost in full, without the wolf's framework to organize the answer. She is not willing to do that. The refusal to cure is not simply bravery or tradition. It could be the very specific, very human avoidance of a reckoning that would require her to hold something she is not ready to hold without the beast alongside her. The hunts she leads are the most visible expression of this. Every successful hunt is a proof of control, evidence that the transformation serves her, that she runs the wolf rather than the wolf running her. Every clean kill under discipline, every tracked prey taken exactly as planned, is an argument for the version of herself she has chosen to be. She is building a record. Whether the record is meant for anyone in particular is something only she could say, and she does not say it. It is what she can do. Mastery means this. Again and again, in all weather and all light, across the plains and into the forests, proving through action that the beast is a thing she directs rather than a thing she becomes. When you offer to help companions cure their lycanthropy, when you complete Kodlak's quest and the possibility is open, and Heir declines, the declination does not sound like denial from the inside. From the inside, it sounds like principle. It sounds like the statement of someone who has thought carefully about who they are and has made a decision grounded in values. She is articulate about it. She is composed about it. The articulation and the composure are real. They are also the surface of something that is not being said. The visible architecture of a position that is doing structural work it does not announce. There is one more piece to place, and it is the most recent one. Kodlak dies during the attack on Jorvaska. He dies as harbinger, as the figure who represented the companion's conscience. In the matter of the beast blood, the man who wanted to be free of it and spent years working toward that freedom. His death is not the point of the companion's quest line, so much as its inciting rupture, the loss that reorganizes everything. But the specific irony of what happens after sits quietly at the edge of the quest line's resolution. Heir, who refused to accept Kodlak's position on the beast blood, is one of the people who pursues justice for his death. She is one of the people who ensures that Kodlak's soul reaches Sovngarde clean, that the cure he sought is applied posthumously, that he gets the ending he wanted. She does this with genuine love for him. The contradiction does not diminish the love. It simply shows you that two people can care deeply for each other and be completely unable to follow the other to the same conclusion about what their shared condition means. She honored his choice for his soul while refusing it for her own. That is not hypocrisy. It is the portrait of someone who is holding two irreconcilable things and not pretending they can be resolved. She will run forever in whatever playthrough she inhabits. She will hunt under every sky Skyrim has, in every season, with the particular focused intensity of someone for whom the hunt is not recreation, but maintenance. She will be exactly who she appears to be, and the thing she appears to be will be genuine. And underneath the genuine thing will be whatever she is running toward or away from. The quiet engine that makes the running necessary. The game does not confirm what that engine is. It shows you the velocity and trusts you to wonder about the source. The plains around Whiterun are wide enough to run in indefinitely. The seasons turn, the hunts continue, and Heir keeps moving, which is perhaps the most honest thing she can do, keeps proving that she can move with control and purpose across a landscape that does not care about what happened, that the grass grows back regardless, that the sun comes up over Whiterun Hold and illuminates whatever she has most recently become, and that becoming it again tomorrow is still within her power. She runs. The beast runs with her. She has decided they run together rather than one chasing the other. And maybe in the running, in the hundreds of mornings of choosing this particular forward motion, the decision eventually becomes the truth it was built to replace. Or maybe it never does. The game does not say. It simply shows you a woman moving across the plains with the purposeful intensity of someone who has somewhere to be and does not ask you to look at where she came from.